Hello guys, this is the third lesson in a series I'm doing on the web server. In this series, I want to introduce you to the web server. In the first lesson, we looked at the Apache web server and saw how we can use it to publish our HTML pages. In the second lesson, we looked at scripting. Scripting is not just used to build websites. Scripts are just little programs, and they're used in all areas of software development. In this third lesson, we're going to see how Apache can host scripts as well as web pages. You will hear people talk about static websites and dynamic websites. So what do they mean by this? A static website is made up of HTML web pages. A dynamic website is made up of HTML web pages and scripts. These scripts are programs that can do a lot more than just display information. Today, we're going to add a Contact Us page to our website. The Contact Us page is going to send us an email when the user presses the Submit button. We're going to achieve this by writing a script that takes the form data as input and sends an email message as output. This input processing output pattern is probably the most fundamental pattern that you'll see in software development. Just about every piece of software accepts some input, does some processing on that input, and returns some output. The four basic steps that our script is going to do are: first, we have to parse our input. You can think of parsing as splitting the input up into its pieces. Next, to make our example a little more realistic, we're going to look up the customer's location based on his or her IP address, and we're going to use an external service to do this. Then we are going to create an email message. And finally, we're going to send that email message, again using an external service. Right, let's get started. We are going to add a script to our website using an Apache feature called CGI. CGI is seldom used by web developers these days, but it is a very simple and flexible approach to adding dynamic functionality to a website. One of the advantages of CGI is you can write your scripts in any scripting language you like. I'm going to go through the example quickly. Don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. I will include links at the end of the lesson that you can use to fill in the gaps. I have installed Apache on my computer, and I've added the document root folder to Visual Studio Code. Inside the document root, I can see my website files. Notice the CGI bin folder. If I open up this folder, I can see some sample scripts. If I access these scripts through my web browser, Apache will execute the script and display the results. I'm going to go ahead and start creating my Contact Us script using Node.js. CGI is a protocol similar to HTTP. The output of my script needs to conform to this CGI protocol. To send a response, I need to first send a header like so. So you'll notice that I'm using an HTTP response code 200, which means everything is okay. There were no errors. Then I need to add a blank line, and then I can add the content that I want to display to the user. Now, because this is a script and I want it to be executable, I need to put in a shebang, and I need to tell the operating system what interpreter to use to run the script. In this case, it will be Node.js. I also need to make the script executable. So I need to give the script executable permissions, and on my operating system the way I do that is like this. So now the script is executable, and I can run that script from the command line like this. Okay, and I can see the output of the script. So this is the header line, and a blank line to separate the header and the content, and Apache is going to recognize this. And so if I come through here and I execute my script, Apache is displaying the content as I expected. The first thing my script needs to do is parse the form input data. CGI parses data into a script using environment variables and the standard input. Let's see how that looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through to my Contact Us form, and I'm going to set the form action to the URL of my script. And that means that the form is going to send its data to my script. Let's go to my Contact Us form. And let's add some data into our form. Right. So here I'm printing out the input that my form is receiving, and you can see there's quite a bit of data here. In the query string environment variable, I can see the data that was entered into my form: the customer name, customer email address, message subject, and the message. So what are all these other pieces of data? These other pieces of data are metadata. So these are other details that I might be interested in about my user. For example, I can see what type of client application he's using. So I can see that this user is using Google Chrome and he is on a Mac. I can also see the user's IP address. So because I'm running this application on my local machine, not out on the internet, I'm getting a strange looking IP address. But if this was deployed onto a web server, I would see the user's IP address and various other bits and pieces of information that might be useful to me. So the first task that we need to do is we need to parse this form input data, which means we need to break it up into its pieces. I'm going to use a library to help me to do that. And that library is a library called QueryString. And let's see what the input looks like once it's been parsed by QueryString. So QueryString is just a simple little utility that is just splitting this up for me, just because I don't want to have to do that coding myself. Okay, that didn't work as expected. Now, why is that? Okay. I think my script is hitting an error. Let's just see what that is. So I'm going to put a bit of error handling into the script just so that I can see what the error is. I'm going to use a try catch. I'm going to put all of this into the try. And if there is an error, I'm going to print that error out. Right, query string is not a function. Okay, I'm just going to quickly look up the documentation of this query string package, npm query string. Okay, and there's the correct usage of query string. Right, so there we go. We've parsed our form input data and it's given us a nice JavaScript object for us to use. Right, next up, we want to look up the customer's location based on the customer's IP address. And we're going to use two libraries to help us do this. The first one is called IP location, and the second one is called, let me just check my notes, country code lookup. You can read the documentation on these two modules on the NPM website. And the reason I need both of them is because IP location will only give me the country code, like ZA. Country code lookup will take that country code and will give me the actual full country name. So I've already prepared this. I've already prepared this code. I'm just going to paste it in to save time. Right, now this IP address location code might fail, and if it does fail, I don't want the script to crash. I just want the script to leave the country and the city blank in the email. So I'm going to initialize these two variables, country and city, and they're just set to undefined. And if there is no error, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set city to IP location result.city, and I'm going to set country to, let me just import these guys. I'll copy that straight in just to save time. So you can see what I'm having to do just to handle errors and make sure the script runs even if errors happen. Okay, so we now have the country and the city. Let's just print something out so we can see that. So I'm going to print out the full result that I get from IP location and the country and the city, so we can see what they're set to. Now, of course, this is not going to work because my remote address is not going to be set properly. So let's just see the defaults should come through as just undefined, and the cities actually come through as a blank string. So I'm just going to make these slightly better defaults. Okay, right, the city has come through as a blank string. Right, I see, okay. Okay, that's fine, I can live with that since it's, right, so we now have the country and the city. Let's just make sure that this works by, let me get my IP address. What is my IP? So this is what would normally come through if I was not running on my local machine. If we were running the server, if we were running the Apache on a remote server, this is what would come through. And let's just see that this works. Okay, so country South Africa, city Johannesburg. So there's the details that have come back from the IP location module. Okay, let me put this back to where it should be. Right, so now we've looked up our customer's location. Next up, we need to create the email and send the email. Okay, so now we're going to create the email message and send the email message. We're going to be sending the email message using a module called Gmail Send. So let me install that. By the way, when I do -- save like this, what that's doing is that's saving the dependencies in my package.json file. And that means that my dependencies are documented. And also the package.json file saves the version of the library that I'm using. Okay. Right, I'm going to now paste in the code that I need to send the email. So first of all, I need to initialize the Gmail send library like this. And there are two variables that we need, a Gmail username and a Gmail password. And I'm going to hard code those in. So I will put these in off camera. I don't want to show the whole of YouTube my Gmail username and password. Okay, now I need to create my email message. So what is my email message going to look like? And that is what my email message is going to look like. Okay, so it's basically just taking customer name, email address, subject, the message coming through from the customer, and a few bits of metadata which will be useful for the person receiving the contact us email to know. So the IP address, the user agent, in other words, what computer is my customer using, the country, and the city. And I'm just going to update these. Customer email address, customer name, message, message subject, customer name, customer email address, message subject, and message. Okay, so that's correct. Then the environment variable, remote address, HTTP user agent, the country, which is just country, and the city, which is city. Okay, so that's our message. Let me just see what that is set to. Okay, I'm going to put in my fake IP address just so that I see it all working. Okay, so that's the message that the customer will see. And what I can do is I can actually render this as HTML, but I don't think I'm going to waste time doing that. Okay, next up I need to actually send this email. Okay, and I do that like this. Alright, so I need a to address environment variable. And the to address I'm also going to hardcode. So this is the email address where the contact us form is going to send emails to. And also I'll put this in off camera so that the whole of YouTube doesn't all see my email address. Okay, let me put this back to what it should be. Okay, so this send process might error, and if it does error, I want to know about it, and I will just print it out. Now I'm expecting it to error because I've got a bad username and password. Right, so there you go, invalid login, username and password not accepted. So what I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to just fill in the correct username and password, and then what we can do is we can see that we can actually see the email coming through. Now the one setting that I did need to set in my on my Gmail account, I needed to come through to here to myaccount.google.com/u2security, and I needed to enable less secure app access in order to allow me to use my Gmail account to send email in this way. So I've now set my username and my password. I set those variables above to my Gmail username and password, and if I test my form, we will see that it actually is working. Okay, so there's the information coming through. Right, so the final thing we want to do is we don't want the user to see this messy output when they submit the Contact Us form. We want them to be taken to a nice thank you page, like this. And in order to do that, we're going to have to send a, we're going to have to instruct the browser to redirect the user to that page. And we do that by sending a 302 status code to the browser with the location that we want the browser to redirect the user to. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove all of this output. Okay, I'm going to remove the error output as well because I'm going to give a good error output. I'll do that in the next step. Okay, and the way that I send a redirect is like this. This actually needs to be a 302. If I use a 301 move permanently, the browser will, that's not going to work. Okay, and that's the location of the page that we want to send the user to, and we put a new line at the end there. Let's see if that works. Okay, so it's going to send the 302 response code, and the browser redirects the user to thank you page. Great. And the last thing we want to do is, if there is an error, we don't want the user to think that the message has actually gone off and get that message. We want them to see that there was an error, and so what we will do is, in the case where there's an error, we want to send an error code, the right error code, which is a 500 error, and that will just show the user that something went wrong. So I'm going to simulate an error by putting in a bad password, and let's just make sure that we get the correct behavior. Right, and that's exactly what we want. We want an error page to show up. Right, so I've added some links, which I'll also put in the description of the video below, to resources that you can use to find out a bit more. So I've put a link to the Node.js website, a couple of Node.js training courses, one paid one free one, a training course on the Bash terminal, which is the Unix terminal, and also the terminal that I have on my Mac, and a tutorial on CGI and the Perl scripting language. And finally, thanks for watching. Please leave some feedback for me below if there's anything you think, any way that you think I can improve. And if you like the video, give it a like. And if you want to get updates on any new videos that I publish, hit the subscribe button below. Thanks for listening.